So, Dasha, Trump made that call into Fox this morning. He made the unconventional choice to join the spin room after the debate last night. How's his team feeling about the debate this morning?
Yeah, so let's walk through some of the facts of the aftermath here. As you mentioned, the former president went into the spin room when, you know, the conventional wisdom is that winners don't spin. He ended up in the spin room. He has now said he doesn't think that a second debate is necessary when his team had previously said, including right after the debate, some of his advisors in the spin room saying that the former president has committed and is happy to debate again with the vice president. And his team is out on the airwaves today, largely bashing the moderators, criticizing the network that hosted the debate and criticizing Harris, not talking so much about their candidate's performance. Now, some of the Republican operatives that I've been talking to have given some mixed reviews. Some say, look, he did no harm. Others saying he really did take the bait from Harris, and they're frustrated by that. I just want to read you what one Republican operative told me. He said, economic start was fine. Abortion was a disaster. Then she baited him with the rallies comment, and he hasn't been off the ropes since. It's like his kryptonite. He also said that she made age an issue without even saying it, that Trump sat back and let Joe Biden sound old and incoherent in that first debate. Now she's sitting back, letting Trump sound old, angry, and rambling. And again, that's from a Republican operative. So the Trump campaign, I think, you know, from behind the scenes, wishes that he had spent more time on answers like immigration, where he could have sort of criticized Harris, could have touted his administration's victories. Instead, he went into the unfounded claims about Haitians eating cats and dogs, sort of at every moment where he could have touted his accomplishments, could have criticized Harris and the Biden administration. He tended to go a little bit off the rails, not exactly what the campaign was hoping he'd accomplish last night.
All right, Dasha Burns, Monica Alba, ladies, thanks for the reporting. Michael, Trump is today saying this was his best debate ever. Is that the reaction you're hearing from Republicans?
No, no. And that operative that Dasha was talking about, no, that's mild compared to what I've been hearing from folks and the reaction. They're stunned by this and they're stung by it. This was one of the worst debate spankings, political spankings that the nation's gotten to see in a long time. And Donald Trump, he's going to come on. He's a spin guy. That's what he does. He spins lies and webs, you know, a lot of BS out there to get you to believe something. He figures if I say it and I say it loud and I say it enough and I say it on Fox, then it's real. And the only thing it needs to be real for, the only people it needs to be real for are his people, his base, his MAGA. He doesn't want them to be shaken and shook by what they saw. And so that's going to feed that. Remember, his campaign has been trying to expand the electorate for Donald Trump. Donald Trump has told the electorate, I don't need your vote. I got what I need, which is MAGA. So, yeah, he's going to come out and he's going to say what he's got to say. What Harris did last night was what I hoped she would do. And that was find that very sweet line between being prosecutorial, right, which she did on a number of occasions, but most importantly, presidential. She had to show people that they could trust her to be president. She had to sound like she was a president. She could be president in talking about foreign policy, in talking about the economy, but most especially to the reporting we just heard, talk about the future and to really talk about it in a way in which Americans, particularly those on the fence, those who may still think that things were better under Donald Trump, to see themselves in that future and to see themselves in a better place and to say rather rightly, he has nothing for you. He has no health care plan for you. He has no economic plan for you. He has no plan to keep us safe and out of future wars. So I thought she did an incredibly good job at all of that. And Donald Trump showed both his age and his frustration with being on the stage with someone who was better at the game than he was.
One issue that the vice president spoke very passionately about last night was abortion. And of course, Donald Trump said what he has said in the past, taking credit for overturning Roe, falsely claiming everybody wanted him to do that and everybody's happy with the state of play. While we heard from the vice president a completely different message, clearly painting a picture of what women in this country are enduring in post-Roe America.
The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that.
Amy, that moment came pretty early in the debate. How do you see that connecting with voters?
I think it connects. The Harris campaign in particular said that that was their strongest moment in the opening bit of the campaign, of the debate. So they feel really strong about how that went. But Donald Trump in particular, he needs women right now. And more than anyone, he has a solid base with white men. This was his appeal to women. It's why he's been talking about issues like IVF and abortion recently, and why he can't decide on where he wants to go with this issue. But this is not a good look for him. And I know that's why the Harris campaign felt really good about how she came out fighting on this.
The Harris campaign also saying that 71% of their fundraising during the 9 p.m. hour last night came from women.
Right.
The money coming in from those donors. Michael, I know you wanted to weigh in on this as well. Trump was asked point blank if he would veto an abortion ban, and he wouldn't answer. He even said he hadn't even discussed the issue with his running mate. He seems sort of stuck between pleasing moderates and his base on this issue. Will either camp be satisfied with his evasiveness last night?
Look, Donald Trump is trying to have it both ways. He knows that this issue is a torch for him. He gets burned by it every time because he, at the very front end of this conversation, on the heels of Dobbs and on the heels of what we saw in subsequent referenda around the country, where Roe was leveled up at the state level through, ballot initiatives, in which Republicans themselves were supporting those initiatives to preserve Roe in state statute. He has now found himself on the wrong end of that conversation. So, that moment about J.D. Vance and whether or not they talk to each other, that was actually symbolic for a larger problem that he has with his running mate. On the heels again of, a choice that he did not necessarily want to make, but his sons made for him. So Donald Trump now finds himself in this difficult spot on this issue, and he's going to try to have it both ways. But she nailed him the way she needed to, because it's in his Project 47, which is his effort, on his website about what he wants to do. It's in Project 2025, and it is in his own public statements. And it certainly is in the public statements of Republicans in the legislature, Congress, and Senate who will support a national ban on abortion. And Donald Trump, no matter how much he wants to dance and lie about it, if he is president of the United States, will sign that national ban when Republicans pass it and put it on his desk. But he can't say that because, as we saw him flip-flop on his own initiative in Florida, the vote about 6 weeks, a 6-week prohibition on abortion.
Right, getting an amendment on the ballot for their state constitution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's all over the map. He's all over the map, and he cannot nail this issue because he got on the wrong foot at the very beginning.
As Dasha talked about this moment that was so bizarre last night, we got to play the clip. Baseless rumor about Haitian migrants in Ohio. J.D. Vance has had some moments talking about this on the trail. Trump trotted it out last night unprompted. He was fact-checked. Let's take a look.
Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Amy, that is bonkers. I think the vice president said a lot with her facial expressions as he was giving that answer. But I wonder, how does this hit with average Americans who aren't plugged into right-wing fringe conspiracies?
That was the moment it went off the rails. And I've talked to Republicans about that last night and this morning. That's when it went crazy and haywire. And they said all he had to do was talk about the issues. But instead, he did go into conspiracies. That's when they knew that he was in trouble. And so, all he had to do was talk about immigration and the economy. And with this sort of comment, it doesn't play well, and they know that.